Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's the internet's favorite movie-centric list-making podcast right here for your eyes and ears. 10 to 1. I am one of your hosts, Josh, joined with me, as always, by the person that's probably going to buy a cheesehead hat soon, Jen.
Well, I'm not going to buy the cheesehead hat, but I'm sure that somebody in my
Solidarity.
family, somebody in my family will. I'm not allowed to be anything but a New York Giants fan because contractually, I was born in a place that just basically, the moment that you're born, they're like, no, I'm sorry, you have to be a New York Giants fan. So, yeah,
Okay, I
that's me.
get that because technically I'm a Texan, so
I mean, you're born with these contractual agreements that just say, okay, you will always be a fan, whether you win, whether you lose, whether there's a good year or a bad year. It doesn't matter. You have to have it. I went to a Cleveland Browns game once with a New York Giants jersey on. That's how much of a fan I am. It was scary. They're diehard. They're scary. They're scary fans. So yeah.
Jacksonville's much the same way. I went to because as said Texan, I first of all I don't like the Cowboys. Never have liked the Cowboys. So when they announced that Houston was getting a new team in the Texans, I was like, okay, I'm going to jump on board that team. That's going to be my team. And lucky for us, we've never been good. So consistency, that's key. But
Mm-hmm.
they come to Jacksonville every year since they're division rivals. And the the funny thing is, I have a Texans jersey that I would wear to these games. And I would catch a lot of crap from Jaguar fans because of my jersey. And the thing is, they would start laying into me, and then I would turn around and show them whose jersey it is, and it's Tony Baselli. Like a legendary Jaguar who played for the Texans for like 20 minutes,
Ooh.
but they still released a jersey for him. So I would turn around, they see it's Baselli, and they're like, "Okay, you get a pass because Tony Baselli's the man." It's like, yeah, yeah, he is, and I understand that he was playing in Houston, for less time than it takes for most people to eat lunch, but I'm kind of, got a foot in both camps here, so you can't really give me a hard time. Like, okay, yeah, that's fair.
If there's anything I've learned about football fans, it's that yes, they can give you a hard time. That also, I believe, is contractually just a part of your existence. If you are a fan, you are allowed to give anybody else basically any kind of guff just because they are not the fan of your team. And it's okay. It's okay. This is the one time when we're like, yeah, this is okay.
Now regionally, and the NFL is kind of new to Northeast Florida, even though it's been around for over 20 years now. It's always been like a big college area. We have the Florida Georgia game every year, played in Jacksonville, the biggest cocktail whatever of the something. And what I know about that rivalry, and other than myself being a Florida fan, it is one sports rivalry that always shows up with a body count. So, talking
Ooh.
about taking things to the next level, I believe one year somebody was thrown off the ramp at the stadium.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Jeez.
But you know what isn't nuts?
Tell me.
People that make great career choices, such as an actor that wants to be a director and is good at it.
Hmm.
Yeah, that tied it all together there. So here's the thing. Sometimes it takes someone that's been in front of the camera to really understand the nuance of performance. You know, it takes somebody that's been in front of the camera to understand why certain lines need to be really emphasized through the cinematography. And sometimes it takes somebody that's been in front of the camera to stand behind the camera. And tonight's lists are all about the people that have made that jump. People that have been known. I mean, let's face it, pretty much almost every director has been like, well, let me try acting. I guess that didn't work. How about directing? Okay, that's a bit disingenuous. But there are a lot of actors out there, directors out there that started out in acting because, there are more slots to fill for actors than there are directors. But tonight we're going to talk
True,
about
true.
people that were successful in both camps. They were successful actors and then they became successful directors.
Sounds like it's going to be an exciting list.
Now, the question is not if there's going to be crossover. The question is how much. And did we pick the same movies?
That I think we might have some disagreement on. Although one of them I think we will definitely cross on.
I also see one, and at least one being, I'm going to say maybe even the same spot. So we will see as this show gets underway. So who should start us off?
I can't remember who started last week, so you go ahead and start.
All right, for number 10, in actors turned directors, which you can find the list on Letterboxd at 1021pod. Oh, I should probably get that set up real quick. I keep forgetting that it's a thing that we do now. I go through the list and create the official 1021 pod list on the Letterboxd. Josh's actors turned directors. Since I'm starting this off, let's see. And then I'm going to go ahead and type in the name of that movie. Sorry, folks. I know I should have got like this done pre-show, but
homework.
Well, my number 10 is going to be one that some of you might not even realize he's a director now, because he doesn't do a ton of projects. But what he does, I think he does very well. I'm talking about, you know what? I'm about to say his name. I'm not allowed to say his name. I have to do an impression first. Okay. I started out as an actor and I was in the Police Academy movies, but it was really hard to keep talking like this forever. It just doesn't seem like a really good idea. It's a career choice, So I went behind the camera and really, made some good movies. Bobcat Goldthwait. The movie that I'm choosing to represent on this list is God Bless America. I'm hearing people go, oh, what's that? Well, I'll tell you. God Bless America is about it's about this guy that's like, well, think Falling Down, right? Where he's just had enough. And except when he's had enough, he just starts killing people that annoy him. And he winds up getting this teenage sidekick to go on this killing spree with him, going after reality stars and bigots and other people that they just absolutely loathe. The bottom of the barrel types. And the reason I chose this movie for Bobcat Goldthwait is because of its sort of representation of the subject matter that he's kind of works with when he's directing. He's also done World's Greatest Dad. It's filled with dark humor and it, it's a story. I'm not talking about World's Greatest Dad. God Bless America is also filled with dark humor, and it honestly, again, let me tell you, I watched this movie before I knew who directed it because I had always thought, you know, what if there was somebody that made a movie that was about people just going around killing all the people that they didn't like, the people that cut you off on the road, the people that cut in line, just all sorts of different people you just make you angry. And then I found out that the movie was made, and then I found out, oh wait, it's Bobcat Goldthwait. So this, he's also has a writing credit on this. So having that to stand on, I started checking out his other work. World's Greatest Dad, and he does quite a few stand-up specials. God Bless America, though, is richly dark, and you'll be laughing at things that you'll kind of feel guilty about. But it's that voice that makes Bobcat Goldthwait and God Bless America my number 10.
Okay. Uh, I, uh, I can't. I wish I could say that I like that movie, but I no, don't. But good choice. I mean, definitely a, a an actor turned director that I think we've gotten some interesting films out of. Um, okay, my number 10 is I feel like most people know who Kenneth Branagh is, um, and they know his name, right? But I don't know
Yeah,
if a lot of people know who Kenneth Branagh has been and kind of what he's done. Kenneth Branagh has done everything from um, Murder on the Orient Express to Death on the Nile. He's done Hamlet. He directed a Harry Potter film. He has just an extensive IMDb page. And honestly, I have a lot of respect for Kenneth Branagh in a lot of different ways. Like, I really do respect him as an actor. He just always brings the sauce every single time. But I also really respect him for his sort of love and iconic representation of Shakespearean style movies. He just has a way of bringing some of those forward that are amazing. However, the movie that I chose that I think is maybe my favorite Kenneth Branagh film, simply because it was done kind of like tongue in cheek, but also it just kind of kicked off this episodic adventure, I think, on exactly the right note. And I am choosing Thor. Thor for Kenneth Branagh was kind of a weird I think it was kind of a weird pick for him, but he definitely made it work. Thor is, Thor. The telling of Thor is kind of like it's. I don't want to call it the origin story of Thor, but it kind of is. I mean, it explains a bit about how Thor kind of figured some things out. His relationship with Loki, it's sort of more like the prelude to who is Loki than it is the prelude to who is Thor. But despite that, it's really it's well done. It's very well done. I mean, in terms of the Thor movies, do I like the Taika Waititi movie with Thor better? Yes, I do like that one better. But do I appreciate Kenneth Branagh as the bringer of Thor to us? In all of the unique ways that he did. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I oftentimes go back to this movie because um it's entertaining in a way that doesn't feel like it's so heavy, and I can't watch it in one sitting and just like feel good at the end of it. There's something about that that's actually really good. I find few movies anymore that are just plain entertaining for the sake of being entertaining. Thor is definitely one of them. So I give Kenneth Branagh a lot of props for that. The other thing that I really think is worthwhile mentioning about especially the way that Kenneth Branagh brought forward some of the Thor ideas is, look, you're under a lot of stress when you are anywhere near the Marvel franchise. And there's a lot of demands on what you can and can't do. And I feel like he paired the the perfect amount of it's got to be funny because people need that as sort of the offset for some of the really terrible things that are going to happen. But he also kind of made Thor like, you know, a dude, a bro, uh, you know, everybody's homeboy. And I don't know, it worked so well that I feel like as they kind of went forward, Thor was continually always branded in that role. And I loved that. I think it worked really well. Contrast that with, like as an example, the Superman franchise, where Superman has like such a teeny tiny amount of humor available to him at any one given time, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And but as a result, throughout the entire recent Superman franchise, like we're talking the past less than a decade, it never feels to me like there is any kind of real levity in the Superman movies. In Thor and in a lot of the Marvel, but specifically in Thor, there's always humor. There's always time for comic relief, and oftentimes at the expense of Thor himself. So I give Kenneth Branagh a lot of props for this. Thor gets my number 10 choice, and Kenneth Branagh as director gets my director turned actor number 10 choice.
That is a surprising choice.
I
Not
mean,
the
of all the
director, but the specific movie. It's like
yeah,
genuine superheroes.
yeah, of all of the, I mean, I really almost went with the movie called um The Magic Flute, which I feel like he did a phenomenal job with. But Thor is more mainstream and I think people like it. Um so yeah, that felt like a good choice. And again, I just really love that movie. It's such a great one.
Another.
Also, just so that you know, count here. Kenneth Branagh has received 16 Academy Award nominations. He's only received 2 Academy Awards, which I guess I shouldn't say two, because even
Only
two is a
two,
lot.
huh?
But
What
he's
a
he's
jabroni.
received 16 nominations, so good for him. Good for him.
Well, my number 9 is nowhere near on that scale, but he still makes some, I think, very entertaining movies. Some good stuff. There are a lot of people out there that are going to be a little upset by some of the omissions
Uh
on my
oh.
list, but and this is going to be one of those choices, just like Bobcat, where they're like, so you added him, but you left off, you know, X, right?
I can see that.
Well, I think sometimes X, whoever that may be, is gets a lot of time in the spotlight being celebrated as a director. I'm not saying I made a list completely devoid of actually great directors. I'm just saying that when it comes to my list, I'm putting a little bit of shine on some people that might not be known for the directing, but they're still good at it. They're still successful at it. Make sense?
I think so.
Which is why my number 9 um, is Ben Stiller.
Hmm.
The movie that I've chosen. Oh, this is going to get people riled up. The Cable Guy. I think not enough people really appreciate The Cable Guy and its, you know, message about loneliness and somebody wanting a friend to such a degree. They just happen to have a really, really jacked up past and, you know, kind of psychopath. But, all in all, not evil, right? Jim Carrey doesn't go evil with his portrayal of, quote unquote, Chip.
I, I feel like that's open to sort of subjective opinion, because I don't know about that. I think some of it is kind of evil.
It's definitely in the realm of, dude, you're that's just don't that's wrong. Don't do that. That's awful. But you know, he's the kind of guy that he doesn't just want a friend. He needs somebody in his life to kind of validate it. Even when he's, you know, talking with the paramedics at the end there. Spoilers for the cable guy. When he's talking to the paramedics and he's like, "Will you be my friend?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, buddy, I'll be your friend." And he's like, "Yeah." Just always, always on the hunt for someone to give him that validation. But Ben Stiller directed, in my opinion, a superb dark comedy about friendship and neurosis, I guess. But he's also probably better known for things like Zoolander or even the Great Tropic Thunder. Would Tropic Thunder be a better fit? Sure. But again, it's a movie that gets a lot of shine because it is so amazing. I I think the Cable Guy, admittedly, is not better than Tropic Thunder. I do like the sort of the bounce between Ben Stiller and Jim Carrey as two comedic actors playing off of each other. It's a lot of fun, and seeing um, Jim Carrey do karaoke to um, Jefferson Airplane, exquisite. So Ben Stiller, the Cable Guy, is my number 9.
Okay, I have a problem here, so I am going to ask you to do your number 8 here first before I can even get to it because I actually have to go take care of something real fast. Sorry, real life podcast issues, but I will be right back.
All right. I guess we'll get to my number 7. That's no, my number 8. Excuse me. Why not? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my number 8 is brought to you by an iconic actor, an Oscar winner. He is the actor's actor. He's America's dad. He's Tom Hanks. And the movie is That Thing You Do. I don't know how you can really beat that, as far as a directorial debut. But he does such a great job with That Thing You Do. A story about a band of one-hit wonders in the 60s. In fact, so much so that the band is called The Wonders, a little on the nose. The bass player's name is the bass player. Could have been a little more creative in that regard, but it all boils down to this band that is, again, they're a one-hit wonder. And Tom Hanks is the guy that signs them to what was it, Playtone Records, and he's like, "You guys are great. You guys are great." And the lead guitarist, he's like, "When are we going to come out with the next single?" And eventually, he's like, "No, there is no next single. You're one hit wonder. This is it. This is as far as you're going." And basically, what it comes down to for the rest of the band is figuring out where they want to take that. What are they going to do with their lives after the success of their one hit starts fading? The movie's mostly about the ride to the top, the rocket ship that puts them square in the middle of Success Town. Relationships crumble, new relationships form, and people kind of get a better perspective on this thing called life. It's an absolutely amazing cast. Tom Hanks, of course, Tom Everett Scott, Liv Tyler in one of, I think, her better roles, even though she's girlfriend. That's pretty much it. Still does a lot of great acting in this. Steve Zahn, an underrated comedy force for sure. Uh, Ethan Embry rounding things out. Oh, Giovanni Ribisi. I forgot he was in this. But That Thing You Do is one of my favorite movies about a musical time period. It encapsulates the era so well. In fact, it did it so well that the song That Thing You Do became an actual top 40 hit in 1996 because it what do the kids say? It's uh, you know what? Not even gonna try it because I'll just make a fool of myself. Even though that's not new. I love this movie. If you recall, on our list of favorite fictional bands, the Wonders or the Oneaters, before Tom Hanks was like, "You're the Oneaters," the Wonders. He won spelled Onedrs, and like that's stupid. You're the Wonders with a W now. That's that's how people are going to know who you are. And the rest is the movie. Just watch the movie. That Thing You Do. Tom Hanks does an amazing job for the first time behind um, the director's lens, putting together a very tight film. Now, one of the other notable not performance, but directing efforts from Tom Hanks is Larry Crown. Could have been, Larry Crown up here with That Thing You Do, but That Thing You Do, I think, is just much better in every way than Larry Crown. Not that Larry Crown's bad when it comes to a movie about a guy, trying to basically start his life over. It's Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts. Good little story there. That Thing You Do, though, that's the one that makes my number 8.
Well, just by way of short explanation, I'm hoping that this solves the problem, but my smoke detectors were going off for no apparent reason. Um, so I don't know what's going on.
You want to know what it
I
is? I'll tell you what it is.
Ghosts.
No,
It's always
no, no, no,
ghosts.
no, no. Your smoke detectors knew that I was on here spitting fire.
Hmm. Except you weren't talking when they first went off, so I don't know. But all right,
You're
I'll
supposed to
give you
yes and right.
I'll give you your ego boost there.
That's how
I
comedy works.
God, I
Yes
don't know what the heck is
and
going on. Okay, well, I'm gonna tell you my number 9, and then I'll tell you my number 8.
cool,
Um,
cool, cool, cool.
okay, my number 9 is Penny Marshall. And I'm sorry that I
Really,
didn't. Yeah,
number
sorry
9.
that I didn't. Sorry, I didn't pick the movie that I think everybody thinks that I should have picked for this one because I know what that actually is.
Can I
But
can
I
I pick?
picked.
Can I guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Everyone probably thinks you should have picked A League of Their Own, right?
Correct.
Okay, and I'm guessing you picked Big.
I did not. I did not.
Oh,
That would have been, I think, a serious contender. And oh man, my smoke alarms are still chirping, but we'll see what happens.
okay.
No, I didn't. I actually picked a movie called Awakenings, which
Ah,
I think was absolutely stellar. First of all, Awakenings deals with this subject matter that is absolutely sort of crazy, in the sense that it's based on a true story. It is something of an enigma that happened, that was like a side effect of a drug called L-Dopa. And people who had been in a catatonic state for decades suddenly woke up, and it was like insane. It was like a miracle thing. Now, sadly, it didn't, it doesn't have the best of the best of the best endings. And L-Dopa turned out not to be like the miracle drug that they wanted it to be, but the idea of the movie is sort of one of absolute, you have to take advantage of the things that you have while you have them, because you don't know how long they're going to last. And it's just a poignant, beautifully done film with amazing cast, from Robert De Niro to Robin Williams, John Hurd, Max von Sydow, Penelope Ann Miller, just absolutely brilliant performances throughout. And honestly, the direction and the technical aspect of this movie, rather than, sort of like pick a movie which I think does sort of have like a great story to it, this story I think gives the director a chance to shine, because there are a lot, it's very heavy on dialogue, it's very heavy on interpersonal mechanisms that really require a director to decide how to best use the camera in order to make the most of it. It's dense in a lot of places in terms of its dialogue. That I think is a real test of a director, and she just shines in this movie. So, Penny Marshall, number 9, Awakenings. Okay, now my number 8 is, for me, a, this movie is not, I'm confused sometimes about the ways that directors end up in front of a camera. Okay, but with this one person, I'm not at all confused. I think that he actually does a better job behind the camera than he does in front of the camera. And I'll have to ask you, Josh, eventually when I say this, if you think that this is correct, because because his in front of the camera scenes are amazing, and for a time he was absolutely like, Hollywood's darling. But I'm talking about Robert Redford. So Robert Redford, starts out his career as almost kind of like, uh
So yeah, Robert Redford starting off his career as Hollywood pretty boy. Would you say maybe taking those roles of young, good-looking chap hanging out with Paul Newman, just quite frankly being freaking awesome.
all right. I am having all kinds of technical difficulties to make. Yes, thank you for that. You're right. That's exactly what Robert Redford starts out as. Almost like a young Brad Pitt, right? Like, he just starts
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
everybody's darling, everybody loves him. Okay, but then he goes on to start doing things like All the President's Men, 3 Days of the Condor, and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, man, this guy's seriously got some major acting chops." And then you move into further and further into his career, you get to sort of the meat of what he does. And I'll tell you, he in behind the camera, he has done some amazing things, absolutely amazing. And on top of that, just his ability, I think, to be an activist for the world is also truly inspirational. It's very, I just feel like it's an amazing kind of a thing. So I chose for Robert Redford this movie that's called, I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but it's called The Milagro Beanfield War. And it wasn't really a big commercial success or anything, but it was amazing. It's the story of this place in New Mexico, and they basically, it's like, the developers versus the community. And it's truly just a beautiful take on what that sort of looks like when you have developers with all the money in the world, and then you have people that are actively trying to maintain their own way of life, and all the things that go sort of into that. There's a lot of drama in it. There's a lot of ups and downs, but it feels like this is the kind of movie that he would absolutely be a part of, based on who he is and also based on what he has done over the course of his lifetime. So, number 8 for me is Robert Redford, The Milagro Beanfield War.
Okay. Yeah, can't say that I've heard of it, to be honest.
It's really good. Like it's one of those movies it's worth watching. It's kind of like, Aaron Brockovich without being Aaron Brockovich, but it has that feel to it. Like, it's very activism centered, but it's also, I mean, it tells such an up close and personal story or stories. And it, it perfectly fits even today, even though that was many years ago. So, I mean, like 30 years ago. It perfectly fits even today because we're still dealing with the same kinds of things. So yeah.
Okay. Robert Redford's an excellent addition. He didn't make my list, but wow. Okay. My number 7 is, it's kind of someone cut from a similar cloth. I think, very much if he were, if both Robert Redford and my pick were kind of in their prime at the same time, young men, they would be probably notorious for kind of palling around um, Vegas and things like that. And also at the same time, it's not unheard of them for him to also help out with certain activist goals that he finds important to him. Also started out as kind of a heartthrob in television. I'm talking about, for my number 7, George Clooney. There's a guy that, when you think of him on, I know most people are going to say, well, he was on ER. It's like, no, let's go back further. When he was on Roseanne, I never thought, oh, that guy's going to be a great director one day. But turns out, yeah, he's pretty darn good at directing. The movie I chose was Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, mostly because I absolutely love Sam Rockwell in this movie as the sort of, it's hard to say that, it's a biopic because it's not true. For those that don't know, Chuck Barris was a TV producer and host of the Gong Show, but he always had this sort of story where he's like, I'm also an assassin for the CIA, and he would take these trips around the world under the guise of being a producer and assassinate targets while he was out. So just the idea of that movie is weird and wacky. Sam Rockwell starring, Drew Barrymore, and it also Julia Roberts. It's got a great cast. One of the things that made me sit up and take notice of this movie of George Clooney, where the directing really came through. There was a scene where everything was seemed there's probably an actual answer to this, but I never looked it up. But it seemed like everything was shot on a carousel, having all of these sets built on this giant carousel. And as the scenes are taking place, everyone's sort of like walking through, and oh, it was so excellently done. That's honestly 2002, one of the first times I really noticed directing. As I was watching a movie for the first time, it really stuck with me. And to think that George Clooney would go on to do things like uh, The Monuments Men, The Ides of March, Good Night and Good Luck, The Tender Bar. I think that's his most recent. Well, none of these are what you'd call super amazing. Some of them are really darn good, but I don't think anybody's going to say George Clooney was robbed for an Oscar. Not yet. Um, he's going to get there, but I don't think we're there just yet. He's built an impressive resume for being an outstanding director, and it's only a matter of time before he really uh, not only gets the recognition, but gets rewarded for it as well, other than monetarily, because dude makes money. George Clooney, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. It's my number 7. Wondering if,
Well,
oh,
I
there you are.
sorry, I was just low on the draw. I think that that is actually a really good choice. I do think that George Clooney is actually a really good director. Um, I sometimes think that it says a lot about our directors what movies they choose to direct, because they're not directors like in a pool where you're like, it's hard to explain, but the way that Hollywood works is not always about giving people equitable choices in which movies they can or cannot direct. And so it's interesting to see our choices as actors in what directorial roles they've chosen to make. Because I think it sometimes sort of says a little bit about who they are as people. Um, and I think you can really see a lot about George Clooney that way too. So that was a good choice. My number 7 is a man that needs zero introduction, although I'll give you a little bit anyway. Uh, he is one of those people that is kind of like, you know him and you know you've seen him, and yet sometimes it's hard to remember. I'm going to go all the way back to the year 1976. I think it ran for 5 seasons though. But in 1976, he was still playing a character that, if I say the name Meathead, you might know what I'm talking about. He played on the All in the Family show as, what was his name? Michael Stivic. Michael Stivic. But Archie called him Meathead. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. God, that show is so. Oh my God, that show is. I at some point we'll have to actually have a conversation about All in the Family, because, man, going back and watching it now, it's so easy to see how similar the bunkers are to uh mainstream America. It's very interesting. Okay, anyway. It's Rob Reiner is the guy who plays him. And so Rob Reiner goes on to do a bunch of things, including create really iconic other roles. He does a company here. He's the founder of a company, um, with Castle Rock Entertainment. And now I always thought that Castle Rock Entertainment was somehow related to Steven Spielberg. I mean, I'm sorry, Stephen King, because Stephen King, Castle Rock, right? No, no, it's not where that came from. Something completely different, but that was super interesting. Anyway, they did things like Harry Met Sally. They did A Few Good Men. I love that one. Ghost of Mississippi. But okay, let's talk about the movie that I chose that he directed, which I think is phenomenal. And yeah, you can fight me if you don't think so. It's called The Princess Bride, and there is nothing about The Princess Bride that doesn't make you feel like it needed somebody who could see its vision. And honestly, I feel like that is exactly what Rob Reiner did um for The Princess Bride. I'm gonna say one thing though about this, which I think is sort of difficult, and that is The Princess Bride feels like it was done by multiple directors. Um, it feels to me like multiple people were involved in the directing, in the storytelling aspect of this, and that I feel like was also very intentional, because there are really nice long pan shots. There are obviously a lot of action sequences, but then there are these sort of like moments of almost still beauty, which makes you think that, there were different ideas sort of at work here. And the answer is no, it was all one person. And that is one of the reasons that I think that this movie earns Rob Reiner a spot in this list, not just because the movie is good, but because directorially this movie jumped into so many different realms, used so many different ideas, and it made the movie work because the movie is told multi-perspective. The movie is told across different uh both places and timelines. And just the idea of interspersing someone reading the story to his grandson while everything is going on is sort of a stroke of genius. I mean, obviously the editing was really good in this, and he didn't edit it, but there is something about the directorial skill of pulling all these pieces together which really makes you feel like, yep, this is definitely a fairy tale story worthy of the ages. And yeah, so Rob Reiner gets my number 7, The Princess Bride.
And there's so much to unpack with this selection. First of all, um, let me say sarcastically, oh wow, Jin chose The Princess Bride. What a shocker. But the fact that it's number 7
yeah,
is
that
what's
tells you
throwing me off.
Yeah, that tells you about the top level of my list, doesn't it? Because I got some power hitters coming up.
Makes me think I didn't understand my own assignment.
I mean, directorially, holy crap! I got some serious technical excellence coming into play here, which yeah, you'd be hard pressed to beat some of these. I mean, I actually kind of feel bad putting Princess Bride at number 7, but honestly, there's no way to move him. I can't move it any further up the list because the people above this, as much as I hate to say it, because the one that's going to come after this, man, the story I would definitely replace with the Princess Bride, but from a directorial standpoint, you got to give props where props are due. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see if you agree.
Okay. Something to look forward to later on in the show because, well, no spoilers. My number 6, I believe that's where we're at. It's honestly, it's a movie that we've talked about before. I'll keep it simple. Uh, my number 6 is Olivia Wilde and Booksmart. Booksmart instantly became like a top contender for, like, if we were just going to make a list of movies about teenagers, it would definitely be high up on that list. It is, and it shows one of my favorite party scenes ever, and there are tons of them to pull from. That's a good idea for a list in itself. Write this down, somebody. Our top 10 favorite uh, party scenes in teen comedies. I think that's a good idea for a list. Anyway, uh, the movie's about friendship. Two friends that are overachievers academically, and they just kind of they want freedom for one night before they have to, pack everything off and head to college and be overachievers there. They want that one night to just kind of let their hair hang down and be wild. And it leads to a very entertaining film. Now, the thing is, I'd be hard pressed to add somebody on here if they only had the one movie under their belt. But it just so happens, while Booksmart is, again, I think, a better movie, Don't Worry, Darling was also one of hers. And yeah, it's not perfect by any means, but to me, it was sort of enjoyable story. And I can't fault what wound up on screen because it was done very beautifully. Excellent job directing that movie. I just think maybe the story itself was a little lacking um, in terms of quality goes. But hey, we've all been there. That's why Booksmart um, takes the spot for Olivia Wilde as at my number 6.
Oops, it would help if I had my mic off. Nice. Very good choice. I think that was a great choice, actually. Um, my number six choice is a person that I actually really do not like at all. I used to have a great deal of respect for this person, and then I don't know what happened to them. I don't understand how they fell so far off the turnip cart that they ended up being as terrible as they are. So please
It's me,
realize that
isn't it?
when Nah, sorry. Have you directed this film? I don't think you directed this film.
Oh,
Please realize that when I mention this person as a director and I'm giving them full accolades for their directing ability, I am really not endorsing them personally because I think personally they are actually a giant steaming pile of do. Yes, do just not happy with them. The person is Mel Gibson. And Mel Gibson has had his ins and outs of trouble, especially over the past 20 years. He has just seemingly been in and out of continual turmoil, both personal and on a public stage. Everything from anti-Semitism to God only knows what. But as a director, I am going to give him a number six spot on my list for the movie called Apocalypto. Now, if you don't know what Apocalypto is about, and if you haven't seen it, it is definitely worth watching. Um, Apocalypto is not an easy movie to watch, but it is infinitely worthwhile. It tells the story of, I guess, in the easiest way possible that I could say it. It tells the story of a time, a very very long time ago, when things like um, human sacrifice and what's another good way to say this? Human slavery, when things were definitely not good, um, were sort of rampant. And honestly, the the whole point behind this movie is sort of to tell a story that probably doesn't actually need to be told, but it's intense in terms of the adventure that is at its heart. I mean, it is sort of unparalleled in its ability to be. The stakes are so high. Everything that is happening in a way that sort of makes you feel as if you are absolutely on the hook for what's going to happen next. Um, I mean, it does kind of a caricature trope of some of the native peoples and what happens with them, and, taking everyone to the pyramid and things like that. But what I find incredibly fascinating about this movie is that it was shot in the early 2000s, and the ability to use the camera to sort of create action sequences which don't flinch from it is truly amazing. Um, there is something about I guess also I'm just going to skip over to there's another part of this movie where um there's a mom and a kid, and they are in this huge hole, and they're trying to escape out of the hole, but then the rains come, and as the rains are coming, the hole is filling up with water, and it and she's pregnant, and it makes just an incredibly high stakes not moment, but moments when you know that she needs somebody to save her and there isn't anyone around. And so what is going to happen? How is she going to do it? What's going to, how are things going to pan out? It the other thing about this movie, which I think is definitely worth mentioning in terms of the director aspect of it, is this movie sort of deals with medium. Well, film as a medium can take on several different aspects, right? So you can have film that is washed through sort of well, you can have color washes, I guess is the best way to say it. You can also use filters, and then you can also kind of use different kinds of tricks in order to make your lighting stark and dangerous feeling in one shot and then completely different in another shot where you've got wide open apertures and it's very easy to see how you can sort of create multiple lighting ideas in even in one scene. Well, that's kind of what Mel Gibson does. We have multiple lighting. I mean, I'm struggling with words because I don't want to get too technical, but we deal with multiple lighting postures, and each individual scene can carry a different meaning based on just the lighting alone. And that is all sort of directorial slash cinematography, but always the cinematography goes hand in hand with the director. So there's something sort of amazing about it. I will definitely, say that this is one of the movies that made me realize that Mel Gibson had something more than just acting in his belt that he could, fall back on. I mean, he did an amazing job of directing this movie. Um Once again, you know, not I would much rather just remember Mel Gibson as Mad Max in the Road Warrior and kind of make sure that that memory stays in my head rather than, all the stuff that has happened since then, because it's really made him fall out of favor for me. But this movie definitely deserves, as an actor turned director, a spot on my list. So, number 6, Mel Gibson, Apocalypto. And hopefully that made sense. I'm so sorry if that didn't make sense. I was really struggling with like what to say about the movie. If you haven't seen it, if I give too much away, it just becomes sort of like, oh yeah, okay, I already know everything that's going to happen. If you watch it and you really are amped up and you can feel the excitement and then you don't know what's going to happen, then it makes the stakes even higher when eventually everything that does happen. You know what I mean?
I'm just gonna nod my head and look pretty.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. I wish I could explain it better, but I don't feel like it's I feel like the one thing that I will say is that the name of the principal character is Jaggerpaw. And Jaggerpaw as a character in this movie is truly a well defined character. I really enjoyed that development. It was absolutely good. And the music in this movie was done by James Horner. So also truly amazing, like really, really, really good. Just everything all came together to make this movie good.
Except for Mel Gibson getting pulled over and tapes and
Yeah, still, and like that hasn't, yeah, that hasn't diminished in any way. I don't know. There's something about, well, whatever. Anyway, I won't get into it, but it's just, yeah, that's not. I do not endorse him as a person, but I do respect the fact that this was a work, this was art, this was definitely worth appreciating. The art itself is absolutely worth appreciating. So,
that's fair. That's fair. You gotta sometimes try to separate the two. For some, it's a bit more difficult, but yeah, even though he is a notable actor, I say that I guess as a bit of an understatement because he's a notable actor. It it might be harder to watch the movies that he's just acting in more so than the stuff where you don't have to see his face and directly tie it to what you're watching.
yeah, I think that is absolutely true. I feel that way about The Passion of the Christ. Like, I cannot watch that movie at all. I mean, mostly I can't watch it because Mel Gibson, but also it feels so disingenuous. So yeah, yeah.
I just never knew there was a genre as, Christian snuff films.
Oh, oh, you know what? We will make that a damn list sometime because
Christian snuff films.
there are so many. Oof.
There's more than one.
Christians love their up close and personal death. Yes, indeed. And I mean, I categorize myself as Christian, so I'm not saying that, like, I don't also partake in some of the uh hey, this is really great, but I mean, all you have to do is watch the story of the Ten Commandments. And I mean, literally thousands and thousands of people are dying constantly. And it just starts to feel like, oh my gosh, you guys, this is insane. I mean, this is worse than a World War II movie. So, yeah. But
Uh,
you know what's really positive?
what's that?
I imagine your number 5 pick.
You would be wrong.
Uh-oh.
Because my number five is disturbing, but not for the reasons that you've listed.
Well, okay, so what makes your number 5 disturbing then?
Well, let me start by saying this. My number five is to honor a director that, I mean, let's face it, it's past the point of him. He's just getting his feet wet. Uh, he's coming to his own. He's becoming a great director, and I don't use that term loosely. I'm very much saying great to describe greatness because of the decisions he's made, the films that he's chosen to put together. I'm talking about Jordan Peele. I'm sure a lot of you can recall Key and Peele, and you know how hilarious that show was, but it was also very clever, very cutting edge, and did a lot for comedy when it was on the air. Especially, when you're watching it with your significant other, and they want to change the channel, and you're like, no, I'm not changing the channel. I'm not changing the channel. And you know what I said? You know what I said? I looked at her
What?
square in her eyes and I said, "Beep." Okay. Sorry. Just Key and Peele's great. Key and Peele's great. And who would have
Little Key
known
and Peele
that
humor.
my number five, Jordan Peele, would have directed a movie like Get Out? And it is so disturbing how, we could analyze Get Out on its own and it could take up a couple hours. So we're gonna skip the deep dive into all of the the wonderful nuances, the 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 sub story that's taking place, the subtext, as well as the stuff that's just blatantly slapping you in the face. No, I want to talk about how this guy that was doing comedy, and not just comedy, but great comedy, gives us Get Out, and then follows it up with Us, and then Nope, and another thing that's gonna be coming next year. But I'd say he, other than the fact that he's an actor, deserves to be on the list very much because he has yet to really give us anything to kind of detract from his abilities as a director. He's doing an amazing job. And even he would say, and has said, when people were comparing him to like Hitchcock, he's like, no, no, I'm not there. Humility, Jordan Peele. He's but with those movies that I listed, he's got 3 outstanding films under his belt. Um, the argument can be made over, which one is second to Get Out, but all of them are thought provoking, um, wonderful pieces of not only entertainment, but reflections through a distorted lens of the world that we live in. And being able to capture that distortion and have you recognize that it's not a peek into an alternate world as much as, um, like I said, a distorted view of ours. That's amazing directing. It's also great writing. But we're talking about directing here. Jordan Peele very much deserves a top 5 spot on any kind of directing list because so far he is, in my opinion, batting 1,000, putting together wonderful pieces of cinema, and that's why he's my number 5.
So, what movie did you choose?
Get Out. Yeah,
Oh, okay, okay. Because I wasn't sure. You talked about so many, and so I wasn't sure which one was actually the choice. Um,
yeah. I was like, we could unpack Get Out for hours.
yeah. Well, and actually, Get Out is further up on my list. So, um, yeah, that absolutely, obviously, I agree. That's a crossover, 100%. But
So when we get to your spot on it, that's when we start unpacking it for hours.
well, we'll try not to because I do
Okay.
feel like do feel like that probably could go on for hours. But it is not my number 5 choice. My number 5 choice is a man who also needs little introduction. His name is Denzel Washington, and I chose the movie from Denzel Washington called Antoine Fisher. So there's a lot of good Denzel movies that I think we sort of are that I could have chosen, and there's a reason that Denzel Washington is so high up on my list. Um, for one thing, Denzel Washington does not sort of shy away from what I feel like is the overtness of any story. The stories are extremely in your face no matter what they are. They don't flinch, I think is the right way to say it. And he's done The Equalizer, which, definitely has sort of its own kind of cult following. When, that's not really my thing, but when it comes to the directorial sort of aspect of things, I could have chose Training Day, which I feel like would have been absolutely as technically brilliant from a director standpoint. But Antoine Fisher, once again, is one of those movies that has a lot of it's got a lot of dense dialogue. It's got a lot of dense sort of subject matter to unpack. And honestly, it requires someone behind the camera that can make choices for the audience so that we know where to not just direct our attention, but also so that our emotions, so that our feelings are sort of strung along as far as we can. And I feel like Antoine Fisher absolutely does that. If you don't know what Antoine Fisher is about, it is basically a biographical story that well, I mean, no, I guess it is actually just very biographical. I guess I won't. I don't know how much of it was filled in with other story pieces, but um, let's just say that Antoine Fisher is. I mean, he's got a little bit of a temper, and he's got definitely a pretty violent past. Um, and it takes him years at it takes him years of suffering a lot in order to sort of come around eventually after he joins the Navy um, to assimilate himself into another family. And there's a lot of healing that goes on. There's a lot of um, sort of acceptance about things that are very difficult to accept, both on a personal level and on a more physical level. And I think this is one of the first films that I saw where a lot of men saw it and thought, that I won't say it changed their opinion on psychiatric care, but I will say it definitely seemed to open up a doorway into understanding things that can be absolutely traumatic as a child and how they relate to your personality later in life, but also how you can heal from them, that there is something actual, that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. And that's what I feel like Antoine Fisher did. um uh the other thing which I feel like sort of is kind of great about this movie is it puts all of the agency into Antoine's corner. Like, it gives him the process and the ability to take everything that he needs to take into his own hands and solve it in a way that is completely different from the way that he has solved everything else, which is through violence. And he has to process and reason it out. That to me is just kind of great. I absolutely love that. It doesn't, it ends in a way that I feel like is sort of y- I feel like it ends in a way that doesn't have a neat closure, but that non-neat closure is sort of like the closure that we get in most of the things that we do in life, where it's a bit open-ended and we don't know exactly how it's going to turn out for us, but at least we have taken the first steps to, confront our demons or make ourselves sort of empathetic to others. We've opened the door. That's what Antoine Fisher does. And from the behind the scenes standpoint, again, this is really difficult to try to convey to an audience without, being gratuitous or going over the top in a lot of ways. And Denzel Washington absolutely nails it in this film. So I'm going to give Denzel Washington my number 5 choice with Antoine Fisher.
Okay. Denzel Washington, your number 5.
Have you seen it? Did you
I have
see
not.
Antoine Fisher? Okay.
I'm guessing you recommend it.
Well, I do recommend it, but I also feel like it's not for everybody. It's difficult subject matter, and if you're triggered by childhood trauma, if you're triggered by abuse and things like that, it's really not kind of like an easy subject to dive into. But it's well worth it if if you feel like you've got a little bit of you know if you feel like you're in a good centered place. It is an amazing story of I think inner what you can do, and what with the help of others, because it's really is the help of others that gives him the push to be a better person. But it's sort of like you don't have to be defined necessarily just by everything that has happened to you. You can be defined by something better. You can be defined by the things that you want to be defined by. And I mean, I know that some of that sounds kind of pie in the sky, but the movie does really kind of break through this idea that you're not just the sum of everything that's happened to you. You're also the sum of the things that you do as a person that either counteract um or sort of coincide with the things that have happened to you, so you can accept them or you can do something different. I don't know, I really did like this movie, though. It was really excellently done.
Maybe I should give it a watch. Because I really love that concept, that idea. So yeah, I'm gonna add that to my to watch list. It always seems to get bigger whenever we do the show. Um,
This movie won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It won 10 awards. Um, it won uh it won awards from Writers Guild of, well, no, actually it didn't win, but it was nominated for Writers Guild of America. Solidarity, everybody. It won a Producers Guild award. It won an American Film Institute award. It won a lot of Black Reel awards. And it also won one that is kind of like a little known piece for humanitarian prize, which is the feature. It won for feature film, and then it also won an Independent Spirit Award. So, like, I mean, clearly with 10 awards over any big genre of award giving, that's a lot to win for one film. So you know that it's got to have some moxie in there because it so many people recognized it as amazing. So
all right, added to the list. Then I guess I will talk about, and I'm Ned, my number four.
all right.
I think this is going to be very exciting to hear your opinion on,
Oh
because it's a
boy.
guy that, again, I don't think gets enough love for the brilliance that he brings to the table. I'm talking about Jon Favreau.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he didn't make my list either. Gosh darn it. I feel like maybe I kind of did him dirty, but I'm really glad that he made your list because I agree. He does not get enough love.
Not at all. Not only is he he's a funny guy, but he to get to my selection for him, I chose Iron Man.
Oh, good choice.
Now, has he made better movies? Yeah, Chef was, excellent. Um, and then he's been working for Disney doing their live action remakes. Although I will never, ever, ever say that the Lion King is live action remake. It is a different animated thing, not live action. Just putting that out there. But Iron Man. Now imagine you're, uh, geeky little fan person. The years, 2006, 2007, and it's announced, oh, there's going to be an Iron Man movie. And you're like, what? Why? It's Iron Man. Why would anybody make an Iron Man movie? And then, rumors going around, Tom Cruise is going to be Iron Man. It's like, oh, so it's going to be like an action flick. I guess that sort of makes sense. But then the word starts getting around. It's like Jon Favreau's going to helmet. And you're like, wait, why? It's Jon Favreau. The guy from Swingers. Is Vince Vaughn going to be Iron Man? And much like, say, Heath Ledger's Joker, we all kind of ate crow on that one. Because not only did he make a watchable Iron Man movie, he made a great Iron Man movie telling the story of Tony Stark, casting Robert Downey Jr., the guy that was born to play Tony Stark. It was exquisite and still one of the top tier MCU movies. Now, the thing to remember is when Iron Man was made, you know what didn't exist? The MCU. This movie, this one movie, set the tone for another 25 plus movies to come. If you don't like the Marvel formula, there's pretty much one guy to blame, and it's not old Kevin. No, no, Jon Favreau. He's the one that set the tone, mixing his you know mixing his wit with action, with a little bit of uh, emotion tied in to really bring you the full emotional experience to a movie. It talks about best friends, talks about potential love, and I'm gonna go ahead and say, let's go deep here. The sins of the father.
Hmm.
All of this gets uh, put into one movie, and if this movie wasn't successful, you know what we wouldn't have? The MCU.
We
John
definitely wouldn't.
Favreau.
We
Yeah,
wouldn't have
I'll
my
start
number
it.
10 pick, right?
That's well, they probably still would have made it, but it wouldn't have been what it is. They might have said, "Okay, we're gonna have to, yeah, pull the plug, send it straight to DVD. Nobody's going to see these movies." But we didn't have to go that route. We have the MCU, thanks to John Favreau. So thank you, John Favreau. Not enough people, you know, bend the knee to respect the man that gave them that. Like I said, he made other stuff too. After all, what does that mean? Go and he's like John Favreau wanted to make a superhero movie. He might made Iron Man, and we got the MCU. John Favreau wanted to make a Christmas movie. He made Elf, instant classic. John Favreau, not movie related directly, but wanted to get into Star Wars. Made The Mandalorian. This dude does not stop, and that is
Uh,
why he's my
uh,
number four.
Also, we would be remiss as podcast hosts if we did not mention Pod Save America, because Pod Save America is one of the best podcasts out there. They always had cool guests. I don't know if they're actually still in production, but they always had cool guests and they always did something amazing. And John Favreau was always part of that. So, absolutely. Um, yeah, this guy is, he's just a genius. I
He's
mean,
so
everything
good.
that he touches turns to gold. Yeah. And, there are a couple of people out there in the world that just, their ideas are just amazing. This is so, not to get off on a soapbox, I promise I will keep this super short, but this is one of the reasons that I truly believe that the WGA, in terms of the writer's strike, is absolutely on top of their game and correct in demanding something more for writers than what they are getting, because we are talking about actors turned directors. But the idea that all of these things came from writers someplace is really big and important to remember. We owe as much to our writers as we do to our actors and directors. So just had to mention that because now's the time. Now's the time. Okay, my number four choice is another man who needs no introduction. You know him as Opie from the Andy Griffith Show. You probably know him from a bunch of other movies too. But I'm going to choose to remember him as Opie because he is so cute. Ron Howard. So the movie that I chose, no surprise, everybody will know, is Willow, because yeah, I absolutely love Willow. Willow is my favorite movie. I'm not even sure if I have a contender um, with Ron Howard that would even approach this particular movie. So directorially, let's face it, Willow was a major challenge. There are Not only is there magic in this, which, okay, let's bar the bad CGI because it was quite some time ago that this movie was made, 1988. Um and the CGI is not great, but there are aspects to this movie which make you feel as if the magic that's happening even behind the scenes is just as good. When they turn the entire army into pigs, that kind of stuff, it's pretty amazing. It's actually really good. This I feel like this movie does something that sort of kicked off the ability for a lot of movies into from the 90s into the 2000s that dealt with high fantasy to be successful, because studios were willing to take a chance on a movie after the success of Willow. um I the movie cost $35 million to make, which back then I'm sure, if we adjusted it for inflation would have been a lot more, but it grossed $137 million. And like that's a lot on a return. That's a heck of a return. And then, if you talk about how much money the movie has is still making in different licensings, and then the, you know, not great but okay sequel that has been airing on Disney Plus, it's still pretty amazing that this franchise continues to move on. Now, let's talk about how Ron Howard sort of made this movie a good movie. First of all, from a directorial standpoint, we have a lot of, I won't call them interesting camera angles. I'm just going to say there's a lot of magic that's happening in these camera angles because he had to fit both Willow, who is by nature short. And in case you didn't know, the guy who plays Willow is Warwick Davis. And uh, on May the 4th, recently, I saw a picture of Warwick Davis who played an AWOC in Star Wars, and he is sitting on Carrie Fisher's lap, and he was 12, I think at the time, 11 or 12. And so, sometimes sometimes the world of good stuff just sort of all meshes together. And this is one of those, I get that feeling here. So Warwick Davis's character is very short, just in nature. I mean, he's little, and he's in scenes continually with Val Kilmer where, again, the camera angles have to somehow reflect both that Willow is very small, but also that Val Kilmer isn't cut out of the scene, and a lot of that is done with perspective shots and things like that. Um, it's really kind of brilliant the way that we get all of the scenes here that we do. And some things are very POV, like you're looking down at Willow when you are supposed to be looking from Mad Mardigan's point of view, and you're looking up at Mad Mardigan when you're looking from Willow's point of view. Things like that don't escape me. And from a director's standpoint, if you're looking at like a scene between Mad Mardigan and Sorsha, who is the principal love interest in this movie, what you find is that the scenes are very even. You can see that he's looking across to her, she looks across to him. The camera is on the same plane. Somebody really gave that a lot of thought. And I feel like that is one of the brilliant sort of aspects to directing that came in through Ron Howard. So, if you haven't seen Willow, please go see it. It's absolutely a lovely, amazing adventure film that incorporates all kinds of different wizards, magic, evil sorceresses, little tiny people, smaller people. It's just absolutely a joy to watch. So Willow gets my number 4 spot, and Ron Howard is my director.
Well, it looks like we are not going to have that prediction come true that I made.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because remember I said, hey, I think we're going to have the same director, we're going to have the same movie. It might even be in the same
Ah,
spot. We will not be hitting the trifecta tonight.
I see. But will we get 2 out of 3?
That remains to be seen. But my number
guess we'll see.
3 is a fella. Well, it's definitely a fella. I just thought of something, so I'm kind of swerving here. He's probably more known for his famous brother Clint. Clint Howard. Yes, I'm talking about Ron Howard. Ron Howard's my number 3. I thought I was going to be able to get a nice joke in there. Turns out not the case. Clint Howard is in this movie, though. For those of you that don't know who Clint Howard is, well, that's not unusual. Just look him up. Ron hires his brother, for smaller roles every now and then, and you'll. I think Clint Howard's biggest claim to fame. It's a thing about Ron Howard. I'm talking about Clint. Um, I think Clint Howard's biggest claim to fame at this moment is getting the Lifetime Achievement Award at the MTV Awards, Movie Awards, and then he was so grateful for the award because it was supposed to be a joke award, a gag, right? And he accepted in with all earnestness and very sincerely, happily accepts this award. And they were like, I don't think we can do this anymore because
Oh
he didn't get the joke.
my god.
But no, we're we're going to talk about Ron. Ron Howard, brilliant director. Opie did good. He certainly has come a long way in his long and you know success filled life. But the movie that I'm talking about is one that you talked about the storytelling aspects. I'm going to take you just one tiny bit further and uh, talk about how it's shooting the rising action and building suspense. You're right. We shouldn't get too technical. Anyway, my movie is Apollo 13.
I knew it.
You did.
I knew that based on what you just said. Yeah, because Apollo 13 does the most amazing job. Um, and honestly, if I didn't feel like I also appreciated the directorial skills of inside of Willow, Apollo 13 would have been my choice because honestly, from a technical standpoint, that movie must have been insane to try to shoot. I mean,
Shooting a movie
yeah,
in zero G's
it's just I mean, you got to have some love for those people cuz wow, that
or
must have been
hate,
hard. Yeah, well, or hate. Okay.
or hate the actors.
Yeah,
So
okay, there's
Tom
that.
Hanks, Kevin Bacon, Bill Paxton. Uh, I'm Ron Howard, and welcome to Jackass. Today we're going to be
Oh,
filming a movie on a plane called the Vomit Comet. So yeah, that's a thing that happened to simulate the zero G's. They were like, we're not going to simulate it. We're just going to do it. We're going to take you way up into the air and then free fall, and that's how we're going to shoot the movie. It's like, okay, again, it's either a tremendous love of the craft or tremendous hatred for these three men. Either way, it gave us some brilliant filmmaking. And what I was talking about before with the rising action, the building of tension, let me summarize it this way. You got a movie based on historical events where you know how it ends, much like Titanic. And for some reason, people were like, why did the ship have to sink? Why did it have to do that? Well, it's what happened. It's what happened. But yeah, we know how Apollo 13 ends in real life. We know they make it back. These are things that you, it's not a surprise, right? But to be able to make a movie and then grab everybody to go for the ride when they already know the outcome, that's how you know you're telling not only a great story, but you're telling a great story well. Because, like I said, there's no surprises here. There's no twists and turns that, you know, you, okay, maybe not everybody was super familiar with the intricacy of Apollo 13, but you could always, well, 95, not really internet, but there were resources available to find out what happened. You they came back because all the interviews and the press surrounding the event or the movie. It's just the idea that this director, this Ron Howard guy, can take this event, this historical event, dramatize it and make you wonder what's going to happen next. But even though you already know, you're like, I can't look away. This is epic. Apollo 13 is an amazing film in every regard, from performances to uh, technical feats. There hasn't been a movie done like this before, and there hasn't been one done like this since. It stands
Although,
alone as great.
let's be real, Josh, we know that the Earth is actually flat. So this movie is just a giant conspiracy theory to make us think that the Earth is round and that we went to the moon.
So you think Ron Howard's in the pocket of Big Globe?
Oh my gosh, he's definitely like Illuminati, isn't he?
Maybe.
To those of you just joining us, that was completely and totally jest, and I by no means ever espouse any kind of conspiracy theory of that like. I fully do not believe the Earth is flat or that they're, yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
ridiculous. But
yeah,
anyway,
same.
but I did have to just throw that out there because that feels like the way that some people might see that movie.
Yeah, disclaimer. It's fine. Apollo 13's my number 3.
That's a good choice. And also, we only missed our director slots by one on
By
our
one.
list. So that's an interesting idea, even though we chose different movies. Okay, my number three movie is from a person who, look, I realize that you might not know who this person is, but you will recognize him from the numerous titles that he has had. He is a writer, he is a director, he is an actor, he is a cinematographer. He has done amazing things across the spectrum of movie making. He is also a Chinese filmmaker. His name is Zhang Yimou. Zhang Yimou, and the movie that I'm going to put him as doing the best with, because I happen to love this movie and I love everything about this movie, including the directorial art piece of it. The actual art direction of this movie is unbelievably unparalleled. Is called Hero. And now I've chosen Hero on my list, I think, at least one other time, and I've mentioned, what I love about the story within the story. I love the aspect of, us not knowing as the audience what the truth is about what is unfolding in front of us, and how we have to go through this entire process in order to come up with a conclusion at the end. And how, even though it cost him his life, our nameless one did sort of something for China that no one else could do. Now, the story is great, but if you turn off the sound in Hero and you're just watching what happens on the screen, it is so beautiful and so breathtaking in its entirety that it's hard not to think about what went into shooting those scenes. Um, there's a vast amount of technical difficulty to a lot of the things, including the water fight scene and the scene in the library, or the multiple scenes in the library, I should say. The scene where the arrows are coming into the calligraphy school. There is so much to drink in. Each individual scene is like a fantasy epic unwinding by itself. And I mean, I know I'm waxing poetic about this movie, but honestly, it deserves it. It absolutely deserves every single bit of accolade that you could possibly give it. The I think that the biggest and maybe brightest aspect of Hero that I can think of is its ability to tell a visual narrative that at once seems to be the visual narrative we're supposed to understand, and yet it gives us clues in it that says you're being fooled. You're being fooled by us. We, the storytellers, are telling you a different story than the one that you are seeing on the screen. And I mean, I absolutely love it, both from a story perspective, but also from the just beauty and cinema that it creates around. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Um, I don't know if I don't know if Hero was necessarily like the movie that sort of made him known in the US, but I will say that um he put out a movie later called The Great Wall, which in China did unbelievably well. Like absolutely, but it didn't do very good in the US. Everybody hated it in the US. And so it's kind of, sometimes I think it must be really hard to be a director on both sides of an international border, because you just don't know. Will it be House of Flying Daggers, or will it be something more like The Great Wall? And I honestly, I feel like it must be really difficult to sort of figure it out. But Hero remains, as I think, one of the best movies that just sort of encompasses every good technical aspect of filmmaking. And much to the director's credit, everything flows together so perfectly that it to this day is still one of the movies that I have on DVD that I will watch again and again and again. I never get tired of it. So Hero, and the director's name is Zhang Yimou, and that gets my number 3 spot.
Sorry, I was trying to make sure I added the right one. Is it 2002?
Yes.
Okay,
Um, I believe so. Yes, 2002 was Hero. Yes.
then I got the right one. Go me for getting it
Now,
right.
have you seen Hero?
I have not.
Oh my god. Okay, don't stop doing whatever you're doing um this weekend and watch Hero. I
I
mean,
was
do
gonna
whatever.
say stop doing whatever I'm doing.
Well,
Um,
you don't have to leave the
well,
list to do it, because I still want to know what your number 2 and number 1 are. But whatever you do this weekend, find time to watch this movie. It it's amazing. I mean, it's breathtaking in look, I studied filmmaking. That was what I thought I was going to do as a career. And I I I don't just sort of feel like Hero is like a good movie that presents a lot of interesting technicalities that are, oh wow, that's really interesting, and oh, I wonder how they did this, or oh, that's really good CG, or whatever. Hero is the kind of movie that you watch and you just feel like there is something so phenomenal about the filmmaking itself that if you are in any way in the movie industry, you want to do better because you want it to be like that. You want it to have that kind of presence. So, I mean, phew, man, take an hour and a half and watch this movie. You will not be disappointed.
well, I will have to find it first. It doesn't look like it's available to stream at the moment,
Oh, darn.
but I will do my due diligence. I gotta spend $3 to watch a movie. Then, doggone it, I'm gonna spend $3 and watch a movie.
It is worth $3 to watch this movie. I mean, I don't say that about many movies that are, like, oh yeah, just wait for it to come on streaming. No, it is absolutely 100% worth giving it or finding it, um, and spending $3 to watch it. I mean, there's just, yeah. I'm really sad actually that I did not see this movie in the theater. I could kick myself for not seeing it in the theater, because by the time that it came to DVD, there's no TV that could possibly constrain or that has to constrain the imagery that would have been absolutely unreal on the big screen. I mean, in the same way that House of Flying Daggers was just absolutely brilliant in the theater. Hero is one of those movies that is just, yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. So,
I felt the same way about RRR. It's like,
oh
how come I
yeah.
didn't see that in
God, I
theaters?
wish that would have gotten a theatrical release. That would have been crazy good.
It's been shown a few times in theaters here, but usually at a very inconvenient time.
Oh, sorry.
So you're the one that's been scheduling these theater releases
Yeah,
that I can't get to.
yeah, sorry about that. That's a thing.
All is forgiven because we're at my number two,
All right.
and I don't think I'm allowed to talk about it.
Oh no?
No, because what can I say that you haven't already?
I don't know. What can you say that you haven't said already?
Oh, I do have one thing. Um, that it's unfortunate that even though this movie is absolutely amazing, it's one of the best uh, viewing experiences a person can have. Unfortunately, it is a kissing story.
Oh no, is there kissing?
There's kissing,
Can you skip ahead?
and that's why it's my number two.
Nice.
See, I could skip ahead, unlike Grandpa, who did not skip ahead for The Princess Bride. The Princess Bride's my Rob Reiner. I was saying Carl Reiner. That's his dad. Um, Rob Reiner really went from sitcom, you know, sidekick to director in a pretty easy motion. It seems.
Yeah.
He just, of course, he comes from you know royalty when it comes to the business. The Reiner name, although maybe not as synonymous with the industry standard these days, uh, definitely was revered in a sense when it comes to comedy. So it sort of makes sense that Rob would follow in the old family footsteps and continue to create epicness on screen, including The Princess Bride, of which we have talked so much about on this show because, quite frankly, it's, like I said, one of the greatest films ever made. So that is why it is my number two.
Awesome. Well, interestingly enough, your number two and my number two are actually the crossovers on our list because my number two is Jordan Peele's Get Out. And while I'm not going to go into a huge dissertation about what Get Out is about, I will say that I, like you, felt that Jordan Peele's entire contribution to film at this point is so significant in the entries that he's had that they have literally changed how we look at certain types of filmmaking. There's a standard that you can set for Jordan Peele movies, which honestly, I almost feel like you can't even set other directors. You can't hold them to that kind of standard because they'll never make it. There's something about Jordan Peele's style that is absolutely brilliant. It's just so careful and every single shot in Get Out, especially, is crafted in a way that either makes you feel invited and very welcome, or in some way so unnerved and very on edge, and something sinister is happening here. But what is it? You can't quite put your finger on it until you get to what's really happening. And because of that, y- that particular style, I think, is something that a lot of filmmakers try to capture and are honestly kind of fall flat. Jordan Peele does not just tell a good story. His direction brings the story frame by frame into either really unnerving sort of territory, or it makes you feel as if you are lulled into this false sense of security. There's something so amazing about his ability to tell a story that I just am absolute awe of. So he gets my number 2 spot. And I don't know what else we can say about Jordan Peele that is not just like, yay for him being a part of movie making, because we all get the benefits from it. So number 2 for me is Jordan Peele and Get Out.
It really sounds like we're just kissing his butt, doesn't it?
It does, and I think that absolutely is not a bad thing.
No,
I feel
it's
like
not.
this is exactly what it should be, right?
Yeah, he definitely
He
like
deserves it.
he deserves all of the accolades, all of them.
Yep. I mean, and if if I were to pick, because I think Get Out is the better technically directed movie. That's the only reason that I chose it. But honestly, when I watched Nope, I was just as blown away. I was just, for the limited amount of storytelling that is happening in Nope, it is so incredibly well done. Like, it's not like it's spanning, multiple generations, or oh my gosh, there's some epicness to the. No, it is the simplest of stories, and yet it is one of the most compelling pieces of art I've seen in a long time. It's just wonderful. And that all of that comes from Jordan Peele. I mean, it really is sort of like he's got everything, and it just shows. It absolutely shows.
I love it when a director and cinematographer can really make the most of the screen real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, Nope is incredibly expansive, which is really interesting because Nope is incredibly expansive and Get Out is incredibly tight. Like the shots in Get Out are really, really, really tight. You see, even in the last shots, part of not knowing what's going on is basically not being able to see around any corner. And that is done directorially through the correct camera shots where you cannot see peripherally. You cannot, but then in Nope, everything opens up. The entire landscape opens up. It's wide, it's vast. It's, hey, I dare you to find the clues here. And again, different storytelling. And that's, I think, one of the hallmarks of a great director is being able to see the difference between those two styles of storytelling.
And he is on this train. He's going to go down in history as one of the greats
Absolutely.
on this train. Okay.
Absolutely.
Don't want to jinx. And I guess it's time for my number one, right?
Number 1, let's do it.
Well, they say behind every great man is a great woman, right?
Oh, usually.
Well, in this particular instance, the great woman is in front of the great man. Because at one point, she was married to my number 2. I'm talking about Penny Marshall.
Ooh, nice.
I mean, how could you not love Laverne? Laverne and
Kind
Shirley
of
was
hard.
a great show, spin off of Happy Days, starring, wait for it, Ronnie Howard. See how this is all coming together? Ronnie Howard starred in Happy Days,
It's like a great soup.
spin off into Laverne and Shirley, which gave us Penny Marshall, who was married to Carl Reiner or Rob Reiner. I keep doing that. And that's my top 3 in a nutshell. But the movie that I chose to represent Penny Marshall is big because that's the other, uh, uh, low key theme of tonight, which was Tom Hanks helps make directors great, and he shows up in a number of these films that I've talked about, including being one of the directors himself. But big for those of you that have been hiding away and not watching movies since 1988. Tom Hanks stars as a man child, and not in the sense that I am a man child, where I play video games and I'm 41 years old, but in the sense that he makes a wish on a machine, one of those fortune telling machines, Zoltan, I believe it is, and wishes to be big. So he wakes up the next morning and he's an adult. He's what? This kid turns into an adult overnight. Tom Hanks wakes up, um, you know, sporting his underoos, going around the house, looks at himself in the mirror. We get that great moment, ah, where he doesn't know who's looking at him in the mirror. Although, I mean, let's be honest here. Some of the things that happen in the movie probably get frowned upon a little bit today, and there's probably uh, a lot of undertones that at the time were kind of just you know there and not really tragic. But I'm just gonna say, if this movie was made exactly the way it was made today, there would be some eyebrows raised with some of the things that happen. Just tossing this out there. Yeah, he's in the body of an adult, but you know, dating an adult, that's that's weird because we know he's a child. She doesn't know he's a child, but he's a child. No, I'm just maybe I'm reading too much into it. Big is one of those movies that I grew up with that was just a lot of, magical fun where you kind of wish when you were, when you're a kid, you wish that you were an adult so you could have, this kind of freedom to do the kid stuff that you want to do. Unfortunately, the real life lesson is when you're an adult, you don't really get to do kid stuff anymore because you're an adult, unless you're me and 41 playing video games. The point is, I want to be a kid again. Where's the machine for that? No, no. The point is, Penny Marshall is known for a lot of big stories, right? League of Their Own, it's a big story. Awakenings, while not a grand scale, it's still a big story, just because of the subject matter. Um, Renaissance Man, being able to film at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. By the way, if you ever do basic training there, they will not shut up about it. Um, a big story with these tremendous set pieces, going up Victory Tower. It's all there. Big is sort of the movie that relies mostly on just the heart of the characters to get you through it, and it does so wonderfully. And Tom Hanks gives a performance because it's not easy to play a kid. It's not. There's a sort of innocence that you have to kind of tie into everything you're doing. Um, a lot of the times you see these kinds of performances and it's just goofy. But Tom Hanks does what Tom Hanks does before Tom Hanks was Tom Hanks. And would you believe I get $1 every time I say Tom Hanks? But Tom Hanks just gives an incredible performance. The kid that plays his friend, um, a great job at being a 1980s best friend. It all comes together so beautifully, and it's a movie that I could watch multiple times a year and never get tired of it. It's definitely one that I've shown my kids, and it's also one of their favorites as well. Penny Marshall is my number one um, actor, actress turned director, and um, between that, League of Their Own, Jumping Jack Flash, Renaissance Man, the ones I mentioned, uh, well deserved, I think.
Sweet, very good choice. Great way to round out the list. I am going to round out my list with something a little bit more, shall we say, classic. Um, and the person that I'm going to mention is someone who I feel like people. I won't say that he's polarizing because he's not polarizing, but people either really love Orson Welles or they really sort of dislike the Orson Welles idea of cinema. There are people, believe it or not, there are people that really dislike it. But I am not one of those people. I am absolutely a person who reveres everything that is Orson Welles. And Orson Welles, his history and his legacy are amazing things. You should definitely look them up if you don't know about them. But I'm going to say that Citizen Kane is the crowning achievement of Orson Welles' career. It follows it. Orson Welles stars in this as well. He also had a hand in writing Citizen Kane too. Citizen Kane is basically the story of a great media mogul, and the movie is told in these series of kind of almost snippets, backwards ideas, reflections. It all feels very disconnected sometimes, but it's all leading to a culmination of here's this is what's going on. It's incredibly um I guess it's incredibly sad in some ways, and it's also a kind of a look at the way that even today we still say the same things about the people who are rich and famous, the people that have influential power. Y- Where where do we stop sort of extolling them as heroes and actually, bring up the people who are the real heroes? Although we don't actually get to that in Citizen Kane, we do get to the question of what is the real story here. Um, it's kind of based on yeah, I won't say it's based on a real story, but I will say that the character himself is based on a quasi real person. Um, the movie is it is it's a piece of its time, but it also tells a story that exists in a world that just does not exist anymore. And I don't say that like, oh, there was a time when, we saw more Pollyanna in the world. Actually, just the opposite. There The movie itself is a really difficult view of the world just prior to our entrance into World War II. And it is kind of like it's a I don't know, it's almost an irony to watch Citizen Kane and realize what is really happening here with what Citizen Kane brings us into. And that aspect of Orson Welles telling this story, I think gives us a really unique view of what movie making used to be like. It's we just I mean, not only do we not see it anymore, but we don't experience movie going the same way that they did when Citizen Kane was first released. We don't experience the world in any of the ways that the people who watched Citizen Kane would have experienced it. It was released in 1941. And to some degree, because we are so distanced from it, when we look back on this art and we see what has been done with it, I think, you sort of have to take a deep breath and really dive into what was the world like then. Because, you know, movie making, and I think our list has been a really good representation of that. Movie making is very much a product of its time. And Citizen Kane is no, it absolutely is no exception to that. Each one of our movies represents moments in time that they were made, and so the experience of watching that movie for the people watching this movie in the theaters was different than then moving 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 years out and thinking about the movie in terms of modern perspective and then what it was like to see it at the time. And Citizen Kane, I have to say, holds up in the most dramatic fashion, although it would have been a different experience to see this in the theater, and we may have walked away with slightly different understandings of what Orson Welles was trying to say. The core tenet of Citizen Kane deals with wealth, and we're still grappling with that today. What wealth does to a person, what it takes to sort of does it actually make you a better person? And by and large, the answer is no. Um, I love this movie for so many different reasons, but it's the Orson Welles piece that makes it so good. If you'll notice in Citizen Kane, they use camera angles that we just don't really use anymore. And I feel like that is kind of sad. We should not be afraid to experiment with camera angles aside from in CGI environments, you know, in VFX aside. We shouldn't be afraid to look at the world from multiple angles, from multiple streams of consciousness, and be able to interpret our art through that. And I feel like that's what Orson Welles does. And that's why Orson Welles gets my number one pick for Citizen Kane.
A classic choice.
I love this movie.
Well, we did it,
We made it through the list.
in just north of 2 hours. That's speedy for us.
I was trying to make it as quick as possible here for you.
That's what she said.
Oh, well, that's yeah, okay, whatever. We'll talk about the genderizing of that later.
Hey, no, well, it's Michael Scott. I'm just saying the line. Making it funny.
Okay. Okay,
So,
so do you so
we have,
I'll go through
uh,
my list and then you
yes.
can go through your list and then I will give you our homework for next week.
Okay. Tell everybody what your list was.
Okay, my list starts with number 10 and Kenneth Branagh, Thor. Number 9, Penny Marshall, Awakenings. Number 8, Robert Redford in the Milagro Beanfield War. Number 7, Rob Reiner, The Princess Bride. Number 6, Mel Gibson, Apocalypto. Number 5, Denzel Washington, Antoine Fisher. Number 4, Ron Howard for Willow. Number 3, pronouncing his name is always hard. G. Oh my gosh, I just completely forgot how to pronounce his name. Ji Yi Mao. Thank you. Ji Yi Mao. For Hero. Number 2, Jordan Peele, Get Out. And number 1, Orson Welles, Citizen Kane. And I'm so sorry for Zhang Yimou for mispronouncing your name. It was not intentional, I swear.
It was totally intentional.
Sorry.
And he's a big fan of the show too.
I heard. Yes, I heard he tunes in regularly from China. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He's our one listener there.
Okay, I wish.
Shout out to everybody that does listen to us overseas. If you have any ideas for lists that you want to see, hit us up, under these comments. And while you're at it, smash that subscribe button and whatnot. That's what they say, right?
It is what they say. Yes.
Okay, that's good. My list of actors turned directors goes as such. Number 10, it's Bobcat Goldthwait with God Bless America. Number 9, Ben Stiller with The Cable Guy. Number 8, Tom Hanks with That Thing You Do. Number 7, George Clooney with Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. Number 6, Olivia Wilde with Booksmart. Number 5, Jordan Peele with Get Out. Number 4, Jon Favreau with Iron Man. Number 3, old Ronnie Howard with Apollo 13. Number 2, Rob Reiner. I didn't say Carl that time with The Princess Bride. And number 1, Penny Marshall with Big. Jen, what is our homework for next week?
Okay, so our homework next week is a little bit weird in the
Weird.
sense
I like
that
weird.
we are going to be picking the worst movies, not the best movies, to round out our lists. And I have chosen this week. Well, you know what? Actually, okay, I'm gonna walk that back because I'm gonna save that one for another day. I've got a really good idea for that one. So instead, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna celebrate the coronation of King Charles. Long may he reign. By our next week's list of the British royalty movies. That is, movies that contain stories, depictions, real or not real, of the British royalty, of the monarchy of England. Um, there are movies all the way back to Alfred the Great and extend all the way forward to Charles and Diana. So I think that we can come up with a pretty wide range of movies over that period of time. And I also think that there can be some super interesting facets and ideas in here that maybe some people didn't think about. You know, movies that are sort of like maybe they're not specifically made to be movies about, you know, the British royalty, but here they are anyway. I've got a whole list of really, I think, kind of cool movies that deal with the kings, queens, and all of the associated players in the House of Cards over there.
Okay. Hmm.
Have you
This
seen
is.
enough of those movies to make a list?
Uh, I'm looking some things up. I know I've seen one. I think I've only seen one. Um,
Oh no. I mean, it's a pretty wide, you know, I mean, when you really drill down into it, kings and queens of uh, Britain have been sort of entwined in a whole lot of stories. I mean, you know, for all intents and purposes, you could use Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
but I'd want to use a good movie.
Yeah, well, I didn't give it any. Yeah, and this is yeah, this should not be the worst of the worst. This should be, you know, hey, here's our top 10 best picks about movies about the British royalty or monarchy. Well, I guess just royalty really, because you know it doesn't have to be specifically the monarchy.
Does it specifically have to be British?
Yes, it does.
I would have busted out all day with "It's good to be the king,"
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's that. Or
but
you know
he's
you could have gone
French.
with like or Anastasia. I mean that's sort of like royalty. Yeah, you could have done anyone. No, no, let's keep it Brit because we're celebrating, and by celebrating, I mean noticing in movie list form, uh, Charles' ascent to the throne. Feels like a you know a timely topic.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to be talking about movies featuring, not necessarily focusing, but featuring the British uh, royal cast.
I'll give you a hint for a movie that is most definitely on my list for next week by saying that one of my movies stars Katharine Hepburn.
Oh, really?
So, I mean, you know, there's tons of movies out there that would qualify for this. Uh,
If I told you what the one movie that I can think of at the moment, if I told you started in that, you'd be like, yes, and yes.
hmm.
But if you even think about it for a minute, you'll probably go, that's probably on his list.
Well, I can tell you that I didn't choose Breakfast at Tiffany's for, you know, because even though there's like a lot of jewels and it doesn't quite work. So,
Well, you say we don't have nothing in common. No common ground to start from.
oh good lord.
Then we're
Yeah,
falling
and
apart.
also yeah, only Josh would quote the plain white tees.
It's Deep Blue something.
Oh, is it? I thought that was plain white tees.
Although I would love to hear them sing it. Somebody get on that. Plain White
Yeah,
Tees.
somebody definitely.
Yeah. Here we are.
Well, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be an interesting. It definitely will require a little bit of thought, but I think it'll be interesting. And I know my list is. I mean, like I have some. I have some super interesting movies that people don't usually talk about, but they're very mainstream movies, and they're good. And in fact, Kenneth Branagh is in one of them. So we even get a little bit of last week's list moving into next week's list.
Okay. Okay. Oh, does it matter how big the role in the movie is?
It really doesn't. Just give us a because, like I said, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. What King Richard shows up for 2 seconds at the end of the movie.
Okay. My my list has tripled. I have three now.
And I think that's fair, actually, because the coronation of Charles lasted for a couple hours. It's true, but honestly, for most Brits, that's about the most that they're ever going to see of him. And then he'll quietly fade into doing ceremonial things and his small part and everything. So I think from a movie perspective, even if you're only on screen for a short amount of time, it's ceremonial enough, and we'll accept it.
Outstanding. I can't wait to do this. Get my research
Super
on, and honestly, I'll probably have to watch a few more movies just to kind of fill out the list. But I
But
can get it done.
first, you are going to watch Hero. I mean, that is your first and foremost homework. You have to watch Hero.
There wouldn't by any chance happen to be British royalty in there, would it?
No, unfortunately, it's a movie about China, so there is royalty in it, but it's Chinese royalty because the emperor is definitely not the king. So, yes.
Okay, okay. Um, well, thank you all for joining us here tonight. I see by the old clock that for a lot of you, it's probably going on supper time. So
It's time to go.
if you need some ideas about what to make, but you still love movies and you kind of have that on the brain, Jen, where can people tie these two things together?
Hey, head on over to moviesandmeals.com and I promise you will find a recipe that will accompany one of your meals. Easy to make, usually pretty simple in their explanation. And I definitely this week am going to do a Willow inspired movie theme. So join me over there for that. I think it's going to be an interesting one. It definitely will include pork bellies. And that's no accident. So, yeah, join me over at moviesandmeals.com. Also, you know what? Join me for on Thursday this week for my podcast, The Storyteller Power Hour, which is finally coming back. And tomorrow we are going to talk about damsels in distress. We're going to talk about how it's changed. We're going to talk about what the Me Too movement has sort of meant to the whole trope of damsels in distress and how we see it. And we're going to talk about the future of storytelling with that trope attached to it. Also, please join us for the podcast, which is Talking From. We are going through each episode of the series From, and it's really good. If you're not watching the series From, it's on MGM Plus. All of your streaming partners will probably have it. It is really worth it to watch this series. It feels a lot like Lost, but I'm going to say it feels like Lost and 10 times better. So join us as we sort of go through the topsy turvy, upside down world of From. And that's every
Okay.
Sunday.
Very cool. Very cool.
And how can
And
we find you, Josh?
oh, there we go. You can always go to whatgomedia.com. It's the website that kind of acts as a center for all the links you need to get to the socials, to get to the shows, and to get to the, I guess the Patreon. But quite frankly, if you feel like throwing some money down and show of support, head over to the merch shop. Yeah, it's less money for us, but honestly, when it comes to you know putting money down for something, I'd much rather you have something tangible in your hands to hold, something that kind of exists, rather than just putting down money for this idea of something. So that's my preference. You do what you want. I'm not going to try to boss you around. But you can always check out the Wadcast every Friday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. Last week, we talked to Whitney Ann Adams, the costume designer for movies like Freaky and We Have a Ghost and Happy Death Day to You. We keep saying those three movies. I mean, this woman has a wonderful career going for her. Her first assistant job was for The Great Gatsby. We found that out
Nice.
during uh, the talk with her. So, wow. So, if you haven't had a chance to check that out, by all means, head on over to whatgomedia.com. Follow the links to the YouTube, Twitch, or even the Facebook pages. Leave a like, subscribe, review where applicable if you're downloading this uh, after Sunday. And yeah, rate, review, subscribe, let everybody know what you think about the Wide Media Podcast, especially 1021, the internet's favorite movie centric list making podcast. Woo!
I know it's
Plugs.
mine.
Plugs. Well, with all that being said, I guess there's only one thing left to say, other than thank you for letting us steal your bit, George Burns. So, say goodnight, Jen. Or
Usually
not.
I just go, good night, Jen. Usually I just go, good night, Jen. But this time I'm going to say, good night, Jen.
I hear the comma.